But sometimes I think the tendency to change things and rename them comes from a nefarious place, because people are just obviously trying to capitalize on the name of something. But often I think it's well placed, and they're actually just trying to, I can't think of a better word, but like rescue a system, try and bring it back to what they
Right.
believed
Absolutely.
it must have been like in times past.
Right.
But I often wonder, if that's a quixotic journey, because at the end of the day, you're going to wind up coming back to functional delivery systems of stand-up, clinch, and ground,
Hey martial arts journeymen and women. So one of the most common questions I get is people asking me why am I not trying to functionalize or save Aikido. And I actually did try that a while ago as one of my first steps, but eventually I came to a conclusion that it doesn't make sense. But a lot of people still don't get it. And instead of me trying to explain to you why I don't think that trying to save or functionalize a non-functional martial art is a good idea, I recently was editing a video with head coach Matt Thornton, founder of Strength Blast Gym International, a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor, coach, and he also comes from the background of Jeet Kune Do, and he was also joined by Burton Richardson, a super high-level Jeet Kune Do instructor who also is instructor of Krav Maga, and pretty much have tried all martial arts. And they had a really good talk about basically honesty in martial arts. And in one segment, they broke down the question of does it make sense to functionalize or save a martial art, and they answered it so well that I felt inspired to share that segment. So in a few seconds you will see that, and hopefully that will put a dot in the discussion of whether it makes sense to try to save a martial art. If you will want to hear the whole talk, I highly recommend listening to it. It's a really, really good one, and by the end of this video you'll see a link to it. So I think it's definitely worth listening to. So I hope you will enjoy this short segment to begin with, and have a good one.
There is a tendency sometimes, and I think it's often well placed, to then want to go back and rescue Aikido.
Mm-hmm.
To functionalize, for lack of a better term, Aikido. And at the end of the day, though, you have to ask, am I going to just wind up back to clinch, right? Am I going to wind up with something that looks like what would happen in a cage? And if so, what am I actually keeping of the key principles, the core movement? And that can be a tricky question, because at the end of the day, there's not going to be much from Aikido that you keep, right? You're going to wind up being a wrestler with an Aikido background.
Right, exactly. And again, with honesty, that's something I really made sure of. I'm not going to do a clinch video and add one C-lot technique and call it, oh, this is C-lot now, because it's not.
Right.
But, okay, to wrestling, turn the corner.
Yeah.
Right. I first learned the footwork and the movement and all. I learned it in C-lot. Yeah. And I will say that they used it to off balance the body and all that. And there are certain types of C-lot that I think have totally lost their thing. But going back to that video from the late 1800s, it shows you that that's really where it came from. These, of course they were fighters, and there's a reason that these things develop in a certain way, and there are certain takedowns that are really, really useful. Sure. Like I use them in Dog Brothers, as you know. Right. So yeah, I was very aware that I didn't say, okay, we're going to do wrestling. I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to do wrestling.
Right.
It really is C-lot base, and then there are some areas where I added some understanding from wrestling, but since I didn't learn it through C-lot, no C-lot teacher taught me that. I mentioned this part I learned in wrestling.
Yeah.
So
I think that's important.
And I'd be very curious to see what these guys look back like, not 50 years ago, but 150 years ago. I mean, what were those guys doing?
Right.
So unfortunately, we're never going to know that. But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, because you can, and then you start changing things, you're adding things in that really aren't from that art.
Yeah.
And of course, I got in all kinds of trouble for doing this, because first of all, wait a second, C-lot is for the street. It's always for the street. What are you talking about? And but we got to tell our own truth.
Right.
I'm very loyal to my, pretty much all of my instructors, all of my instructors I've been loyal to, but
right.
in an honest way.
Yeah.
But the first loyalty has to be to the truth.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. And just as if a student of mine comes up and says, hey, this thing you're doing, there's a better way. How about you do it this way? I'm going to accept that immediately. I think that's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And if I say something and maybe somebody that taught me, worked with me and all, I just think it'd be nice if they would actually look and go, oh, that's a good idea, if they're interested in fighting.
Yeah, no, that kind of thing is important just from a standpoint of integrity. But sometimes I think the tendency to change things and rename them comes from a nefarious place, because people are just obviously trying to capitalize on the name of something. But often I think it's well placed, and they're actually just trying to, I can't think of a better word, but like rescue a system, try and bring it back to what they believed it must have been like in times past.
Right.
But I often wonder, if that's a quixotic journey, because at the end of the day, you're going to wind up coming back to functional delivery systems of stand-up, clinch, and ground.
Right. Well, that's what I find.
On a scientific approach, it would seem like we should be looking for what all those things have in common.
Yes, I totally agree. It's like weaponry arts.
Mm-hmm.
If again, I had the good fortune of training with Illustration. For those that don't know, there's this man who was a grandmaster in the Philippines, and it wasn't a grandmaster because he was wearing some uniform and somebody gave him a certificate or he promoted himself. He never wore, he wasn't wearing uniforms and all. He fought with a sword against other people with swords. Like self-defense wise, when he was 16, he cut somebody's head off who tried to cut him down with a sword. He did actual sword matches, sword against sword matches. And then in World War II, he did a whole bunch of sword work in the jungles of the Philippines. So a guy like that, if you look at him, and we're so fortunate we have video of him sparring he's probably almost 80 years old, and he's actually sparring, and you see there it is. That's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. That looks like what it's supposed to look like. And then when you see his other things, you go, oh, I understand how he's doing it, because it's all for fighting. He's not, sometimes you'll see a technique and all, but he would explain to me, he goes, yeah, you go here and you cut the guy, you have checked his hand, you cut his arm, but it didn't naturally absolutely disable him. You thrust at him, and then from there he's weakening, he's pulling away, and that's when you do the disarm and you come back up. Because there have been experiences where the guy falls down, the other person falls down too, you fall on their blade, and it's just like, okay, I see, again, you're talking about context, where it works, but his delivery system is, there's a lot of sparring because you have to play the game. It's about playing the game. So yeah, I understand I would be somebody who is inclined, as you know, to quote, rescue systems, but again, I have to do it honestly and say, not go, oh, yeah, same thing. Like, okay, I'm going to do MMA now, and I'm going to add a finger jab, and now, now it's some deadly Southeast Asian something or other.
Right.